Personally, I think that quantum computing is one of Silicon Valley's biggest hoax. It's going to turn out to be a really, really expensive hoax where any physicist that is not working on quantum computing believes that it's not going to happen, and only those that work on quantum computing and will benefit from quantum computing think it's going to happen.
Welcome to Threat Vector, the Palo Alto Networks podcast where we discuss pressing cybersecurity threats and resilience and uncover insights into the latest industry trends. I'm your host, David Moulton, Director of Thought Leadership for Unit 42. Today I'm speaking with Nir Zuk, founder and chief technology officer at Palo Alto Networks. Nir's journey began at the age of 16 when he developed some of the earliest computer viruses on his Dragon 64 computer. His passion for technology and innovation is evident. After serving in the military, he worked at Checkpoint, NetScreen Technologies, and then in 2005, Nir founded Palo Alto Networks with a vision to revolutionize network security. Today, we're going to talk about Palo Alto Networks' 2025 predictions. These 7 predictions cover a wide range of topics, and you can read them all on our website. For today, Nir and I are focusing on 3. First, in 2025, organizations will shift toward unified data security platforms that integrate code development, cloud monitoring, and SOCs for seamless AI-driven threat analysis. The consolidation will enhance visibility, streamline operations, and dramatically reduce detection and response times, positioning organizations to better combat advanced threats. Second, established organizations with massive datasets will lead AI-driven innovations, their data volume for continuous improvement. Partnerships between incumbents and agile newcomers will drive collaborative breakthroughs. Finally, we'll talk about quantum attacks. While they're not imminent, harvest now, decrypt later tactics by nation-states will target sensitive data. Organizations should act now by adopting quantum-resistant technologies and preparing with new cryptology standards to safeguard their systems as quantum capabilities evolve. Here's our conversation. Nir, welcome to Threat Vector. It's exciting to have you here.
Thank you for having me.
Before we get started on our conversation about 2025 predictions, I want to ask you a few questions that I saw in an interview with you from 2010 in Computer World. I won't hit the entire interview, but there are a few that I thought could be kind of fun to go back to. The first question was, ask me to do anything but. How would you answer that today?
Ask me to do anything but stop innovating.
What are you reading right now?
I'm reading a lot about quantum physics in order to better understand quantum computing.
And what is your favorite technology today?
My favorite technology today is YouTube. I know it's an old technology. However, I think there's some amazing content on YouTube. And it's a great resource to learn whatever you want to learn. To certain depth, right? After that, you need to start using things like Brilliant, which I use, and other ways to really go deep into learning a subject. There's just so many people out there that have so much to share and to teach. YouTube is my favorite technology today.
That's a great answer. I use it all the time whenever I'm trying to fix things here around the house, figure out how to cook something. So for listeners, I'll put a link to the original interview in the show. I think it's really interesting to go back and see what was top of mind for Nir back in 2014. Today, we're going to be getting into a handful of the 2025 predictions from Palo Alto Networks. I'm really eager to hear your thoughts on these predictions. So let's get right into it.
Let's do it.
Our first was a prediction about how the landscape will transform and the adoption of a unified data security platform that integrates code development, cloud environments, and SOCs. So how do you think that the unified data platform will revolutionize cyber infrastructure in 2025?
Sure. So it's very clear that it needs to happen. And the reason it needs to happen is because cybersecurity is becoming more and more data-based, meaning more and more cybersecurity functions need a lot of data in order to do what they do versus the past where we were just running signatures or some basic rules on whatever it was, traffic files and so on. And now that more and more cybersecurity functions need a lot of data, what we're observing is that there is a superset of that data that is, of course, shared across all of them, meaning if you look at what the SOC, the Security Operations Center, needs in terms of data to perform its tasks of detecting and responding to attacks very quickly, that data contains pretty much everything that all the other cybersecurity functions need. And when I say other functions, I mean things like IoT and OT security, detection based on DNS, cloud security, and quite a few other functions. And then the question is, are we going to see 10 different data lakes, each containing tons of data? Or are we going to see one data lake containing all the data? And I just don't see a good reason for the former, not a single good reason, and only good reasons why. Everything will be in the same data lake. It's, of course, cheaper. It is much more environmental friendly because you store once, you process once. So you need less resources. And more importantly, it works better. Probably if you have all the data in one place, our very smart engineers and data scientists will be able to use some extra data that's in the data lake to make IoT security better in ways that we didn't think about before. Okay, so bringing all the data in one place just makes a whole lot of sense. Running many different cybersecurity functions off that data lake makes a lot of sense. And that was our first prediction. In 2025, we're going to see it start happening.
Nir, what are some of the potential challenges in implementing, this huge data lake and a platform across really diverse organizations?
I think the main challenge is going to be how do you do that in a multi-vendor environment if there's one data lake? And the answer is, one, you're going to have less vendors. And two, there are going to be some strong partnerships in the industry between sets of vendors that will decide to work together. So I think that's going to be the main challenge. Other than that, it's probably going to be a political challenge, meaning convincing different parts of the organization that today maintain their data lake, and some of them like the data lake to run on top of that technology, like whatever, Elastic, and some of them prefer it to run over another technology like BigQuery or some other data lake technology. How do you convince all of them that, okay, we're taking it out of you and we're bringing it into one data lake, and that data lake is going to be actually chosen and run by your main vendor, which is probably your SOC AI vendor. Sorry, you're just going to use that data lake. It's not something that you're going to choose and maintain anymore, which is great. It makes everything much simpler for the organization, but it causes some political challenges.
Right. The front side of any change is always fraught with some anxiety, but once you start to see the benefits of those changes, you realize that it opens you up to being able to do other things simpler because you have fewer tasks that you have to manage. Can you talk about some of the potential risks and benefits of centralizing cybersecurity into a single platform?
So I often hear about concerns from customers when we talk about those things. And the main concern that they have is vendor lock-in. And my answer to that is, sorry, that's the way the world is. Meaning you have one CRM solution in your organization. So if you picked Salesforce.com, you're kind of locked in with Salesforce.com, and switching from Salesforce.com to another vendor as your main repository for all the data is going to be very difficult. And the same is true for your ERP and other data-driven solutions that you have. So there is going to be some vendor lock-in, of course. We need to look at vendors that have partners that use the same data lake for different functions. And we need to make sure that that vendor lock-in can be mitigated. So that's probably the biggest risk that I'm hearing about from customers, from their perspective. I think that many other risks are not as relevant. For example, customers say, hey, if I put everything in one place, what if you get hacked? And my answer is, number one, it's much easier to guard one data lake than 10 data lakes. And number two, there's a smaller chance of one data lake getting hacked versus 10 data lakes. So if you spread your data with replication across 10 different data lakes, you are at a higher risk. There is the risk of, what if I work with one vendor and that vendor misses an attack that another vendor would have found? The answer to that is usually it's not about the vendor, it's about the data. Meaning machine learning and other types of AI differ from each other not by how good your algorithms are, because these algorithms are all known. They differ a little bit by how good your data models are, but that's only 10% of the picture. 90% of the difference between different AI-based solutions is the actual data, and it's really the quantity of the data. So this idea that if I work with one vendor versus if I work with five, I might miss something it's actually the opposite. Is if you work with one vendor and you put all the data in one place and you work off 5 times the amount of data, you have a much better chance of detecting things versus separating it into different data lakes.
Right. The ability to look across and correlate and stitch things together happens when you're not moving from lake to lake to lake. It happens when you're looking at one big repository of data, so things come together. So Nir, let's shift to our next prediction, and this one is about AI innovation in cybersecurity. Why do you think that the larger incumbent organizations are going to have more success in AI compared to startups in the cybersecurity field?
The main difference between AI-based systems from different vendors is the data that they have. The algorithms are well known. They've been around forever, especially the machine learning algorithms. The data science is important, but is a small part of the picture in terms of the differentiation. It's all about the data. It's about the quality of the data, and it's about the quantity of the data. So in terms of quality of the data, you need to bring the right data from the network, from endpoints, from the cloud, from cloud logs, from workloads in the cloud, from applications in the cloud, including SaaS applications, from identity and access management systems, and so on. And of course, that data will be better if the vendor has full control of the data source. So if you're buying from a large vendor that's providing you also the network data sources, which we call firewalls, or the endpoints, data sources, which we call EDR, or your cloud security, and so on, you'll have much higher quality data versus if you buy your AI from one vendor and different parts of the infrastructure that collect that data from other vendors. It still works if you do the latter, but it's lower quality data from the perspective of AI. And in terms of quantity, that's really where the big vendor versus small vendor comes into play. As I said, the more data you have, the better your AI will be running. If you're a large vendor and you already have a lot of data, we have exabytes of data, then your AI will work better, and that creates a snowball. Because your AI works better, customers will be more inclined to buy your products, because when they test your products versus a small vendor product, they will just work better. Because again, 90% of why they work, the AI works, is the amount of data. And because your products work better, customers will more likely choose you, the larger vendor, as their provider, which will provide you even more data.
Yeah.
So this snowball effect really shifts the advantage in AI. Bing will never be as good as Google search. Why? Because Google has the data and Microsoft doesn't, because Google started earlier. So they have much more data about when you search for X, which link do you click? And that's really what makes the search results much better, is knowing the correlation between what you search for and what you ended up clicking. So Google is better, more people use Google, it becomes even better, and Microsoft has no chance.
So speaking of some of those smaller startups, how do they compete or collaborate with larger organizations?
I think that the larger vendors like us will need to create an ecosystem where those smaller startups have access to the data so that they can make their AI good. Because without access to the data, their machine learning models or whatever AI they're using, type of AI they're using, is not going to be as good and they won't be able to succeed. And in order not to run into a chicken egg problem of to build startups, you need the data, but to have the data, you need to be beyond the startup stage. We need to find a way to collaborate with them and to provide them access to the data so that they can become successful.
Can you talk to me about how the success of larger organizations and AI affect the innovation in and around the cybersecurity industry?
We're still certainly seeing a lot of innovation in the cybersecurity industry. I think that we're not seeing enough innovation around using AI in cybersecurity, meaning the most successful and by far the most successful AI-based solutions are coming from the larger vendors because of that chicken egg challenge I discussed. So there have been a few attempts by extremely sharp AI experts, cybersecurity experts, to build startups around them, and they had great ideas. Almost all of them failed. And almost all of them failed because of the challenge in accessing the data, in having access to data.
Is the startup landscape no longer just how much funding you can get? I go back to when you started Palo Alto, I think you collected nearly 10 million, but I don't know that somebody also gave you access to data. At the time, that wasn't the thing that maybe was needed. Is part of the startup landscape in cybersecurity a combination of capital and data such that you can run those nimble experiments and innovate quickly?
I think so. I think that money is important. And if what you want to do as a startup is to use any type of AI as part of your solution, and specifically I'm talking about AI whose data come from your customers. If you want to run some LLM, whatever based AI in your startup, then you're not going to get the data that feeds the LLM from your customers initially. You're going to get a base model from some of the larger providers and then improve it. I'm talking about traditional, real precision AI that needs customers' data in order to operate. Meaning it takes data from the customer environment and find bad things in it or find what's wrong with it or is working to improve something with the data. Their funding is not enough and you need access to data. In the current architectures that we see, it's extremely hard to get access to that data. And we as a large vendor have the responsibility to improve that, to change that.
Do you see an ecosystem coming where larger orgs get lock in on data lakes and then startups have to make deals to build on top of that?
I certainly do. We tried to do it in the past as at Palo Alto Networks. We called it the application framework, and it didn't work out very well. I think it was too early. Data was not as important back then as it is today. I think that it will have to happen right now, or the entire responsibility of detecting bad things will fall on the shoulders of the large vendors. And we don't have a unique look on the talent in the industry. So in order to be able to use talent that's not working for large vendors, we will need to find a way to give them access to the data.
Nir, let's shift gears to the last prediction that we're going to talk about today. This one's around quantum security. And for years now, I've been hearing these discussions that, quantum computing is right around the corner. It's going to break traditional encryption. It's going to lead to significant risks in our digital world. And, one of the topics that is coming up right now is this idea of harvest now, decrypt later. And for our listeners, can you describe or explain what Harvest Now Decrypt Later is?
Yeah. So some people are worried that quantum computers will be able one day to encrypt the traffic that we have today and decrypt the files that we encrypt today and so on. We can discuss later whether that's going to happen and if it's going to happen when. But the worry is one day in the future, and that day can be 5 years from now or 10 years from now or whenever, it will be possible. And you can say, well, when that happens, I'm going to worry about it. And I'm going to upgrade my equipment to be using, or my equipment, my software, whatever, to be using algorithms that aren't susceptible to being broken relatively quickly by quantum computers. So that's one camp. One camp is I'm going to worry about it when it happens. The other camp is saying if someone is willing to spend enough money and energy recording my information today, keeping a copy of it, and then 10 years from now decrypting it, then they'll have my data 10 years from now. And now the question is, do you need to worry about it? So I'm sure that if you're a government and you have some secrets that you don't want to be leaking out in the next 30 years, then you shouldn't worry right now about changing your encryption algorithms to be quantum resistant or to not be able to be broken by quantum computers. And actually, the US government has mandated that across federal agencies because they're worried about it. If you are a civilian agency or if you are a company and you don't worry that much about someone 10 years from now being able to read your data, then you should not be worried about it right now. On the other end, it's not a huge deal. Companies like Palo Alto Networks offer software upgrades to their products so that the encryption algorithms that are being used become quantum resistant. So that even if 10 years from now, someone will be able to decrypt the traffic, and even if they bother right now to record it, and even if you don't think so, but they think that there's something sensitive in it, you're protected because you upgraded to post-quantum algorithms. There is a downside to these algorithms, so it's not that huge of a deal, but things will be slower. Okay, so that's something that that's a downside of upgrading today to these newer algorithms. Things might be a little bit less scalable.
Right. So potentially slower and safer if it matters. And let's get into that. I'm curious, what gives you confidence that you don't think that Q-Day is around the corner or even 10, 15 years off?
So personally, I think that quantum computing is one of Silicon Valley's biggest hoax. It's going to turn out to be a really, really expensive hoax where any physicist that is not working on quantum computing believes that it's not going to happen, and only those that work on quantum computing and will benefit from quantum computing think it's going to happen. But let's look at the facts. The algorithm for factorizing large numbers, which is the basis for breaking the RSA key exchange, which is the basis for extracting the keys to be used for decrypting the symmetric encryption. That algorithm, called the Shor algorithm, SHOR, was developed 30 years ago in 1994. The first quantum computer was built 4 years later, in 1998, so 26 years ago. And in 2012 was the last time that the quantum computer was able to use Shor's algorithm to factor a number that's never been factored before in a quantum computer. You want to guess which number that was? So in 2012, quantum computers were able to finally factor the number 21 and figure out that 21 is 3 times 7. And they had to use a modified version of the Shor algorithm because they couldn't implement the Shor's algorithm to figure out that it's 3 times 7. So they had to hard-code the things that relate to knowing the answer, 21 equals 3 times 7, in order for the quantum computer to figure out that 21 equals 3 times 7. And any attempt since then to factor the number 35, which is 5 times 7, has failed. So really, the only algorithm that we know about, which is the Shor algorithm, some modifications of it, and over time, they've optimized the amount that's required to the amount of resources that are required, we're still stuck with 21 equals 3 times 7, 12 years later. So when I extrapolate from that, I think we're very far from being able to factor it up. Another interesting fact about quantum computers, if you care to guess what's the most interesting, really useful real-world application that the quantum computer was able to demonstrate? You guessed right, none. None of the quantum computing companies, and there are more than 100 of those funded with billions of dollars, has been able to show one, just one, useful use of quantum computer for something that's not at least as efficient with traditional computers. Not a single one. And then in 2019, when you start seeing some of the large quantum computing vendors like Google and IBM and so on, start coming out with claims like, we now have quantum supremacy, and we now finally were able to run something that would take a traditional computer to run 10,000 years. And then when you read into it and you figure out that what they've done is they've generated quantum random numbers. Yeah, of course, when you try to generate quantum random numbers on a computer that doesn't have quantum qubits, yeah, it might take you a lot of time, but there are many other ways to do it in a computer that takes a second. So when they start promoting these claims, you understand that, at least I understand that there's nothing behind that industry.
So not the top priority for you to worry about as a visionary in cybersecurity right now?
No, not at all. I think nevertheless, because post-quantum algorithms are available today, and since the only downside to using them is a slight decrease in the scalability, not of the encryption. So if you have a product that's capable of doing 10 gigabit per second encryption, it will continue to do that. It's just that the key exchange is less scalable, so you can exchange less keys per second, which means that the number of new entities that you can talk to every second is lower. The downside is very small, so why not do it? Maybe
Sure.
I'm wrong, and maybe everyone else is wrong, and maybe those that have the interest in getting billions of dollars in funding are correct, and maybe it will happen. So why not do it? I would say another thing. There's actually no proof that those post-quantum encryption algorithms are really post-quantum, meaning that there is no quantum algorithm that can decrypt them. Look, all these, this entire set of public key cryptography algorithms, starting with RSA and Diffie-Hellman, which we know that theoretically quantum computers can break. This entire set is based on very hard math problems. Okay, so the RSA algorithm is based on the fact that multiplying two very large prime numbers is easy, but taking the product of two prime numbers and figuring out what the two prime numbers are is extremely difficult. Okay, so all these now post-quantum encryption or public key cryptography algorithms that are being suggested are based on different, very hard to solve math problems.
Yep.
There's no proof that there are no quantum algorithms that can solve those in reasonable time. So, but that's the best we have as an industry, and that's what we'll do.
So Nir, I like to ask everyone this question at the end of the podcast. What's the most important thing that a listener should take away from this conversation?
Probably the most important takeaway from this conversation is what we started with, which is that cybersecurity is becoming more data-based. Our ability to detect bad things and to deal with bad things is moving away from knowing about those bad things in advance and looking for them towards just take this huge amount of data and look for the needle in the haystack. And the implications for that are very important. The first implication is it's going to be very wasteful and not as productive to try to do it with multiple data lakes versus one. So we believe cybersecurity is going to consolidate around data lakes, single data lakes. And then the second implication of it is that your cybersecurity will come from large vendors that either or don't work with innovative startups to provide additional functionality.
Nir, thanks for this great conversation today. I really appreciate you sharing your thoughts on Palo Alto Networks, predictions for 2025, and your deep dive into how cybersecurity is becoming more data-driven, where things are going with AI, and just a touch of the conversation on quantum computing and your thoughts there.
Thank you very much for having me.
That's it for today. If you like what you heard, please subscribe wherever you listen and leave us a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Your reviews and feedback really do help us understand what you want to hear about. And if you want to reach out to me directly about the show, email me at threatvector@paloaltonetworks.com. I want to thank our executive producer, Michael Heller, our content and production teams, which include Kenny Miller, Joe Benecourt, and Virginia Tran. Elliot Peltzman mixes the show and edits the audio. We'll be back next week. Until then, stay secure, stay vigilant. Goodbye for now.